To address what was mentioned in the documentary about there not being a very high projection of like Martin Luther King's and Rosa Parks in like the next generation, it opened feelings inside me that I think a lot of young people don't feel like they have any power. So with that, I ask, what could I do to contribute and help the community as just a young Black woman who doesn't seem like I have a lot of power?
You know, one of the things I had to think about even for myself, because when I think about how this documentary came into play, it was at a moment in my life when I felt that I had no power. And when I started researching Rosa Parks and finding out a lot of things about her, is every time that she, even the day she made her stand, it was a day that she felt she had no power. And what it taught me, and not just as a woman, but as a Black woman, and also as a woman, you know, a little over her 40s, I started to think about that I can't look at adversity, because it's adversity that leads to change. So when we just make that decision that we're going to do something, and it doesn't have to be big. I mean, I did what was within my limits at the time. But I think it's important that as we start to think about other generations, you have a power just in your voice and what you do. And it's the little things. One of the things that I was able to do that encouraged me was I was invited to join the philanthropic educational organization, PEO Sisterhood. The sisters are over here in the corner. And all we do is just raise money for women's scholarships. It's little things like that. Because what it's going to take is each one of us doing just our small part, because once we do our small part, then it becomes a larger difference. And that's what she did, because it wasn't just her stand, it was gathering the youth, and it's like my relatives were telling the younger relatives, was that the children were important. And it's so when you pay it forward and encourage others, then I think that's when our difference comes. You are awesome.
That's a good question. So we have friends and folks watching that you can live stream these. We have multiple convocations each year, so feel free to go to cui.edu and you can search for our list of convocations there. So sometimes then you could also, if you weren't able to come all the way down, you can ask your questions online and then get those addressed. Sometimes society tries to tame stories like Rosie's and make them kind of convenient for us. And you are someone who is a professional educator in the field of communication studies, and I think that's an important piece here. How important is it when you're doing oral history, who tells the story and even who edits it?
I was really, really blessed because the people that I brought in on this project had at some point, most of the people, because they go back almost 20 years from the Orange County News Channel, they had at one point met Rosa Parks. And so what I think is, and how I approached this project was, first I approached it by building the credibility. But what I also wanted to do is approach the project by telling people things that they would not know past what they would read in their history books. And so when you go and take on a project like this, and there's so many different people that are doing things. I mean, we have Dr. Hunter here today, and she does things for autism. And then I talked about my group. But when we pick up those mantles, I think it's our responsibility to make sure that we stay true to those stories. And that's what was important to me, was to stay true to the story and to let people know that there's much more to this woman than what we ever said. And so I think even though I'm an educator and I approach this as a researcher, I think as a human being, when we want to do things like this and pick up our cause, we have the responsibility to make sure that we stay personally true to the cause.
Thank you so much for that documentary and sharing that with us. My name is Donna Houston, and we are here Diamond Bar High School.
From us!
Yes. And we're part of also, some of the teachers and leaders are from the diversity think tank. And your message of sharing and teaching our youth, our future, is powerful. We took them out of school, we got busing, and they are here to learn about not only Rosa Parks, but others keeping her legend alive, information. And I want that connection to be here. As we were listening, it wasn't always about Rosa Parks, it was about others. What can you do to help keep history alive? This is Black History Month. Last month, I don't want to keep going on, but I just want to share our youth. And it's important, that's why our youth is here. They had Apollo Night, it was diversity. It was not only for our African American youth, it was everyone there. So that's what we're trying to instill in our youth. So I hope you got the message.
And you better, Brahmas, get the message.
And thank you.
Thank you.
That resembles another question. Maybe you could kind of follow up with this. And the question would be, this inspiration to activism that is perhaps in the time itself something that would be much more daunting, and it's not daunting if it's sanitized history and that sort of thing. But there was a lot said about humility. In fact, in this case, related to Carolyn. To what extent can someone be humble and peaceful, but also find that inner strength? How would you encourage these young people to kind of express themselves and not just think about humility perhaps as something where you're just being passive and not activist?
I think where you can find it is within the strength of others and how they approach situations. I wanted to also mention that my Aunt Carolyn, because of this documentary, the Detroit Trinity International Film Festival gave her a humanitarian award. And that is the first time they have ever given a subject, part of a documentary, an award. And I think it's because when I looked at Aunt Carolyn's story and then go back and thank goodness for Dr. Theo Harris, who did that extensive research on Cousin Rosie's stories, I look at women that are just like you and me, like as humans, because what these women did was they took it and looked at it at a broad way of protecting human rights. And so when we look at that, I think it makes it a lot more, it's not a daunting task, because we all are part of the human race, and there's a little something that we all can do. But what really encouraged me and kind of got me out of my personal pity party was to see how these women faced adversity and they didn't let it get them down. What they did with those challenges is that they went out and made positive difference. The Community United for Progress, I'd never heard of it until I was in Detroit. Well, last week at the screening at Roger Wolfson's house, there was a civil rights attorney from New York, and she said, "We've been supporting this Community United Progress for years. We never knew where it came from." And so, wow, these little ladies, which Miss Wimberly at the time was 87, so right now she's 89. These little women went out, and because they bonded over making sure children were safe and making sure that children had relationships with older adults, I mean, they created something that I didn't even realize left the city of Detroit. It's in New York. And things like that taught me that I can't let my life situation dictate how I can make a personal difference.
Fantastic. We have time for one last question.
Thank you.
If we don't see Jesus Christ as the highest expression of humanity, I think we lose a lot of strength in standing for anything that's right, because he's the life and light of the world. I think the comparison of the quilt making and I think systematic was a word that was used, but I think they mean systemic, because systematic has to do with the legal structure and systemic is the life that makes it work. So I really loved the whole program, but I want to see Jesus Christ honored more. I mean, I didn't hear Christianity mentioned. Rosa was a Christian, and that's important.
Thank you. One of the things that I don't know if it was made clear, every one of the ladies, besides the actual biographer, the reason that they come together was through that church that has been in that community so well. I mean, I was talking over 50, 60 years because most of them grew up in that church. And so what it meant for those ladies was the driving force for the community started from the church. And it was important to me to focus on these women, and that's why I could have had my other aunts be part of it. But when it comes to where the foundation of the civil rights movement is or was, it was the foundation of the Black church. And so to see what these women were doing today, coming out of the Baptist church, that's they're Baptist, coming out of that Baptist church, I think it's important for people who may not go to church to see that we actually step outside our church and we step into the community to make it whole. And so I think every one of those women show that by what they actually do and currently doing in the community. So I think that's important too. And it's a different viewpoint that I took, but I wanted to have the subtleness of it to show that this comes because it starts in the church.
Well, thank you once again. Let's give our guest another round of applause. Thank you so much.